Hello, this is Coach Wilson, and this is Unit 2, Day 5. Today we're going to be finishing up the American Revolution, or at least most of it. We will pick up a little bit on Day 6, just talking about some of the different things going on around the Revolution during that time. But today's journal, after the American Revolution, what did the country need to create in order to have order and laws and to have a government, and why? And I've already mentioned this just a little bit to you, but we'll kind of hit that same topic again today. So today is Day 5, and we want to talk about what issues existed in forming a new federal government in the colonies. Okay, so what issues existed in forming a new federal government in the colonies? Now, the Articles of Confederation were formed in 1777, and this created a system of government for the colonists. It kind of began starting this process of forming a new nation. It formed a Congress that each state had one vote, and it also said that Congress had these specific powers that they could make laws. They could declare war and make peace. They could make treaties and alliances, borrow money, and maintain an army and a navy. Here's the problem. Didn't talk about, what to do if, we're trying to really get something passed. Well, it had to have 9 out of 13 states to pass. So, didn't really address the issue of, how do we get past that point? Essentially, Congress couldn't do anything because it was hard to get the colonies to agree on anything. There's no president to break the tie, to enforce these laws, to say if you break these laws, this is what will happen. There's no judicial branch, so they can't settle any disputes. So you don't have Congress who generally makes the laws. They can't make any laws. You have nobody to enforce the laws of the president, and then you have nobody to decide whether they're constitutional or not because there's no judicial branch. They also don't really have any power to tax. Because without the executive branch, there's no power there. There's no money because there's no power to tax, which means there's really no way to pay your military, which means you can't have a standing military. There's also no amendments that protect the freedoms of Americans and those who are under the new Articles of Confederation. And then there's 13 different tax and trade systems. All right, so there's no unity amongst the colonies of how life is going to function. Now, some accomplishments of the Articles of Confederation. All right, the American Revolution was by far one of its biggest contributions. You also have the Treaty of Paris that was signed as a result of the Articles of Confederation, and this is the second Treaty of Paris, which we're getting ready to talk about. And then it also created these land ordinances, which allowed for the formation of new states, such as Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, and Wisconsin. All those states were formed and those territories formed as a result of the land ordinances that basically detailed how you became a state, and it was just a plan for admitting those territories. All right? So, the next thing we're going to talk about is the Treaty of Paris. In 1783, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay were sent to negotiate for the United States. And the United States was recognized by Britain as an independent nation under this treaty, which is a huge accomplishment. And now our new border will be the Mississippi River, even though there will be some disputed territory there with Spain up until about 1795. The Mississippi River is our boundary, and all of that land that farmers and all of those settlers were clamoring for is now available for settlement. And especially getting to the Mississippi River was a huge thing for those who were in America. The other big thing here that was in the Treaty of Paris, and this one is key, is the British troops must leave U.S. soil once this treaty is signed. And that is going to be something you need to remember. Now, here's a look at a map of the United States now at this point. So you have the colonies that were here, and now this territory right here is going to be kind of admitted into the Union. And now there's going to be a lot of debate over this area and how to get those states admitted and things of that nature. Now, here's a look at the United States. You can see we've got here Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia. All those areas just kind of extended whenever the treaty was signed, but as you'll kind of see, that's going to not last for very long. Now, Daniel Shea was a Massachusetts farmer, and after the war was over, much like when the French and Indian War ended, there was a debt. And many of the farmers who were in Massachusetts were losing their farms because they couldn't afford the taxes being levied by the new federal government, and there's nobody to really enforce those taxes because there's no president yet. So Daniel Shea leads a rebellion of about 1,200 farmers in this newly founded America, leads a group of men against a federal arsenal and tries to seize weapons, and the rebellion ends up being squashed by George Washington and his men. And it shows the need for a stronger central government in our society, and that we have some issues we're going to have to take care of quick. Which brings us to what we're going to finish the day with, and the day is a very short day of notes. Just want to get them through so you could get on to your final assignments. Some of the issues involving the AOC specifically were that British troops never left. The French and Spanish would not allow the United States to use the Mississippi River. So even though they have all this land to the Mississippi, well, now France and Spain are arguing over whether we have the right as Americans at that time to use that river. The debts that were contracted as a result of the war are not being paid. And because of this, it's going to lead to a very poor economy and rebellion. Okay, so even though we just got out of a rebellion against England, now there's more rebellion going on in the colonies with Daniel Shea and farmers and those who feel like there needs to be some stability. And I'll put it to you this way. There's an old saying that I grew up on, that there's too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And what that means is, in a Native American tribe, there can only be one chief. And he rules and tells the tribe how things are going to work. The problem here is that there was no chief. There was no ruling group of people. There was no president. There was no true government that's getting things done and accomplished. And as a result, it's much like a teenager who has just gotten out of high school, turned 18, and his parents have completely kicked him out and cut him off from their money supply. You got to just figure it out. And that's kind of where America was during this point in time. Now, you can look at this little picture here. It says, I have so many troubles. I'm weak, poor, in debt. My paper money is useless, and the Articles of Confederation do not support me. That is essentially where we were. They had printed money during this time to try to give the United States a currency during the war. Unfortunately, it did very little to boost the economy, and even after the war, it did nothing for the economy. Congress could not raise any taxes, and Congress could not regulate trade and collect tariffs. So there's just a lot of things here that are failing as a nation. Now, you got 4 questions for the day. What documents were put in place to loosely create a federal government? What were some of the accomplishments of the AOC? What were the weaknesses of the AOC? And what impact did Daniel Shea's rebellion have? All right, here's your vocabulary words. And if you're having any issues, please let me know. Otherwise, I will talk to you very, very soon.